Well, congressional Republicans are taking their first steps, meanwhile, to repeal Obamacare, a long-made promise. But the current US president is outlining a strategy to save his signature accomplishment. Mr. Obama told Democrats not to rescue Republicans as they struggle to replace the Affordable Care Act. Vice President-elect Mike Pence promising to lower the cost of health insurance without growing the government. President-elect Trump tweeting, massive increases of Obamacare will take place this year, and Dems are to blame for the mess. It will fall of its own weight. Be careful. Joining me now here in Los Angeles, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson and Republican consultant John Thomas. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Do you expect, let's start with you, John. Do you expect a repeal, as has been the Republican mantra for years now, or do you expect a repeal and wait?
I think we're going to see a dismantling of Obamacare. There are some good provisions in the law, and even Donald Trump has said so, the pre-existing conditions clause. So I think they're going to keep segments of it. But by and large, if they don't repeal Obamacare, their base will hang them. So politically speaking, they have to get it done. The question is, what do they replace it with? And they're still figuring that out. And
Dave, I suppose the other thing, too, if you want to cherry pick certain provisions like pre-existing conditions, keep the kids on there, that costs money. That comes from other provisions of Obamacare, doesn't it?
Right, of course. And we've heard President-elect Donald Trump call for some of those provisions to stay, but we haven't heard House and Senate Republicans say those things. And here's the challenge that Republicans are going to face. The blood is going to be on their hands if they repeal and don't replace it with a comprehensive plan that somehow provides health care for 10, 20, potentially 30 million Americans who depend on the Affordable Care Act. Moreover, they're going to have to answer to their constituents when tax cuts are going to go to the millionaire and billionaire class and big healthcare corporations who are paying a hefty tax because of the Affordable Care Act.
Now, do you think that you've seen now already Mr. Obama and others, Democratic leaders saying we're going to call it Trump Care, whatever it is, and sort of shift that Obamacare mantle as Trump Care?
That's a cute way of branding it. You know, it's fascinating to watch as President Obama transitions out of office. It's not exactly this smooth transition. I mean, can you imagine George W. Bush in the final days before he left office, telling Barack Obama that, to draw down troops is the biggest mistake. Whatever you do, we're not pulling out of Iraq. It doesn't seem like a peaceful transition. Look, I think Trump understands the risk of the repeal, but he also knows that it's hurting so many Americans because their premiums have gone up and they can't afford it. It's also hurting businesses, which, what do, Dave? They pass along their increased costs to the consumer who can afford it the least.
Right.
Well, look, here's the challenge. Is Obamacare perfect? Absolutely not. But the challenge is that over the last 7 years, Republicans have had an opportunity to come to the table, to meet with President Obama, to work out the kinks, to come to consensus, and come up with some middle ground. And the challenge is, all they wanted to do, and they voted 100+ times in the House to do this, is just to repeal. But the problem is, they haven't come forward with some meat-on-the-bone, specific, concrete plan for what to replace it with. And I think that's the question. What is President Trump's plan going to be? What are the House and Senate Republicans going to propose?
Got to talk about Julian Assange. I mean, this seems rather extraordinary that, in 2010, Donald Trump was talking about we should have the death penalty for these WikiLeaks, and now he's saying Julian Assange, I'll listen to him because he says Russia didn't hand over the stuff. I mean, what do you make of the whole sort of lessening of confidence in the intelligence community? I mean, this has got to be counterproductive. He's going to be heading that intelligence community in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think what Donald Trump is concerned about is the larger narrative being confused between the DNC being hacked by whomever. Maybe perhaps it was the Russians. We don't 100% definitively know.
The intelligence community thinks so.
Well, look, John Podesta's password was password, okay? Like Julian Assange says, a 2-year-old could have hacked that. So it is possible it's someone other than the Russians. But let's just assume it is the Russians. Donald Trump's worried that the Democrats are hijacking this story to make it that the election was hacked. So the average viewer out in America is saying that Donald Trump is an illegitimate president.
Are they doing that, Dave? Or, I mean, my reading, I've never heard anyone in leadership role in the Democrat Party, saying
they say the election was hacked.
Look,
election was hacked.
They're not questioning Donald Trump's election in terms of the Electoral College.
With the recount,
but they raise a question.
just with the recount.
But that was Jill Stein with the Green Party. But look, they do raise the issue, of course. The Democrats, or Hillary Clinton, won by 2.9 million votes in the popular vote over Donald Trump. But Donald Trump clearly won with the Electoral College. Here's why this is so scary, okay? Hypothetically, there's no doubt in my mind that back in September, let's say September 10th in 2001, had George Bush gotten a tip from the intelligence community that these terrorists and al-Qaeda were going to fly airplanes into the Twin Towers, he would have acted on that. He would have gotten fighter jets up, and he would have done something to try to prevent 9/11. Why this is so scary is Donald Trump questions what our intelligence community brings forward. And if he gets a tip, he might not believe it, and he might not be in a position where he tries to actively prevent a terrorist attack. And that's where I think the challenge is.
But do you agree? I mean, the undermining of even the public faith. I mean, he's got passionate supporters who are listening to him tweet and basically say that the intelligence community is wrong.
Well, this isn't the first time Donald Trump has questioned the intelligence community. You remember he questioned whether or not Saddam Hussein had had weapons of mass destruction. That was an intelligence failure, right? So I think what Donald Trump is saying is not definitively that the intelligence community is wrong, but that we shouldn't jump to conclusions without a full vetting, proper vetting of the process. So he's waiting carefully. He's not saying they're definitively wrong. There's a distinction.
He does seem to be, though, saying that Julian Assange is more credible than his own intelligence services. I mean, that's got to be the takeaway from what we've seen in the last few days. That's got to be worrying.
Well, that's dangerous. I mean, he's siding with a known fugitive who, over the course of the last 8 or so years, has put information out on WikiLeaks that has put American troops on the ground at risk. And that's a real danger. Our incoming commander-in-chief, who oversees the military, is siding with a criminal and a thug and a bully with Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's really scary.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got to leave it there, but you are back next hour, and we've got a lot of other things to talk about. So thanks very much. We'll talk more, Dave Jacobson and John Thomas.